Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for AppSheet Office Hours. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. And joining us today are several members from the AppSheet team who will be taking us through the agenda and answering your questions live. Questions are encouraged, so please feel free to add those into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. And I see many of you are already jumping into the chat. If you are doing that, we'd love to hear from you, where you're from, what you're hoping to get from this session, and then again, if you have any questions in advance. We also have a few pre-submitted questions that we've received that we will cover as well. And for any that we don't get to, we encourage you to ask those questions into the AppSheet community, and the link is in the YouTube description to the community there. So we love to stay in touch, and you can stay up to date in the community there on future events as well. And before answering your questions, we will be covering the following in the agenda today. So first, we're kicking it off with expanded access to AppSheet Core and Workspace editions. Then we'll move on to product updates with AppSheet Databases and input functionality. And then finally, we'll close it out again with that Q&A. All right, with that, I will hand it over to you, Christian, to kick us off with our first topic for today.
Great, thank you. So basically, I'll wait for your slide to advance here, but basically what I'm going to be talking about is the new expansion of the AppSheet Core licensing. So just to explain a little bit, let me provide a little bit of history. So historically, AppSheet Core licenses have only been included for a few Workspace customers. But the new AppSheet Core expansion program detailed here extends these licenses to the majority of our Workspace customers so that almost all Workspace users can create, share, and use apps in their team without having to think about licensing. The specific entitlement is as follows. Before the rollout, AppSheet Core was already included in a few Workspace licenses. So this included Enterprise Essential Plus and Enterprise Plus, as well as Education Plus. As of the expansion, the AppSheet Core is now available to the majority of Workspace licenses, specifically Business Starter and Standard and Plus, Frontline Starter and Standard, Enterprise Starter and Standard, as well as Nonprofits and Education Standard. So note that in order to receive access to the AppSheet Core license entitlement, the customer must be domain verified as well. So next slide. In addition to providing AppSheet Core to more users, Workspace admins can use the new Core license security setting in the Google Workspace Admin Console to control features related to whether apps or data can be shared externally, which is obviously a very big deal for Workspace Enterprise admins. The main motivation for this new setting is that it addresses a concern that we've seen with some Workspace admins where they were essentially concerned with how their enterprise data was being accessed and shared through multiple apps. So with this new security setting, we're hopeful that it helps remove any unnecessary, unneeded barriers for overall broader adoption of AppSheet within the Workspace enterprises. Next slide. So who will be seeing this new security setting? The new AppSheet Core security setting will appear to any Workspace admin that has AppSheet Core users in their organization. So when enabled, the setting itself prevents AppSheet users from sharing apps to external users that are outside the Workspace org, connecting the app to external data sources, again, outside of the Workspace org, creating automations that send emails to external recipients, as well as using externally created AppSheet apps. Additionally, this setting will be off by default for existing customers to ensure no existing apps are unintentionally blocked, and all new Workspace teams that start using AppSheet as of this rollout will have this setting turned on by default. Next slide. So a note about the AppSheet Core subscriptions. This update actually means that most existing AppSheet Core customers will have redundant licenses. So AppSheet Core subscribers can no longer need their standalone subscription if their existing AppSheet apps are shared with others inside their Google Workspace organization. So during the initial rollout, which was back in July, we notified Workspace admins, resellers with customers, and end users who are AppSheet Core subscribers with qualifying Google Workspace editions through a series of service announcements, also known as MSAs, that they should cancel their current AppSheet Core subscriptions to remove this redundancy. There was also a credit available to only annual AppSheet Core subscriptions during the rollout period through August up to and through August 2023. Subscribers who still have questions on this possible refund can always contact their sales representative on this particular point. All right. Next slide. So finally, for more information on the AppSheet Core expansion, I would definitely recommend checking out the Workspace Updates blog post that we rolled out earlier this year, back in July. So you can scan the QR code or just go to that short link there. I also announced it back in July to the actual AppSheet community, so you can see that post as well. Also, if you want to consult a little bit more in detail, you can consult with your Google sales representative directly. We've been training the sales teams on this program over the last few months, so they're well equipped to handle your questions. And also, if you're involved in this rollout and you have any issues, problems, or what have you, feel free to contact our AppSheet support. And so they've also been working with customers they're working through this expansion as well, and so they're addressing some of those issues that they've hit. But yeah, they're up to speed and handling all of the new folks that are being affected by this core expansion. Overall, we're very happy with this overall program. As I said, we expect it to continue to remove any concerns, fear, doubt, essentially with the governance and overall security of applications. And so we are expecting overall like a good turnout for this rollout. So with that, I'll hand it back to Lauren, who can hand it over to our next presenter.
Perfect. Thank you, Christian. And just before doing that, we did have a question specific to this update. So one question is this already rolled out or is there a date?
So this rollout had already started in July, and it's been a progressive rollout. And as I mentioned, there had been some service announcements that had been going out to different populations, the admins, as well as the end users and such. So it's a collection of people that have been notified as well. But yeah, so it's in the process. More people are finding out about it as well. So yeah, but it has essentially gone on since July or mid-July, I think, roughly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving on, our next section is on AppSheet Databases updates. So I'll hand this over to Shirley.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. So here I'm going to share a few updates that we've been working on this past several months pertaining to AppSheet Databases. The first one that we're super excited about that we are working on doing some final testing is increasing the database scale for enterprise customers. So as some of you may know, right now, the size on how large a table can get within your database is 50,000 rows. We're going to be increasing that to 250,000 rows per table in the coming weeks. We're just finishing up some testing and some optimizations there. Now, this means that enterprise customers can build larger tables, hopefully better serving your use cases. The second thing that we're adding to the UI is a progress bar. So we're adding a progress bar to the interface to let you know when your data is still loading, especially for tables of larger sizes. So you'll be seeing that little animation at the bottom of your table there soon. And then just a note about performance and scale, we are increasing and improving this over time. So you can expect more updates later in the year pertaining to performance and scale in this area. And thank you, Lauren. A few other features that we've been working on and bug fixes I just wanted to touch on since I know there's been some questions on this in the community. The first is email autocomplete. So you can now see this inside the database interface. This is also available inside apps as well. And to use this in the database, you just need to add an email column type. So that's the column type that would show this autocomplete. And this is only for Workspace users since that's what we're pulling the directory from. The second is being able to use the row ID of a database in an automation process. So this is especially useful for lookup if you're trying to look up data within your table inside your process. And the email autocomplete and both row ID are already rolled out, and you can start using that. The third thing that we're starting to roll out this week is a bug within the table settings. So within the data tab inside the editor, what you can do is to change the table settings to point to another data source. Currently, there's a bug with this with AppSheet Databases where there were some errors that we had to handle that prevented users from changing the data source directly inside table settings. And we've now resolved this and are rolling out the fix this week. So this will allow you to more seamlessly transition between different database tables. Maybe you're prototyping in one, or you're just doing some testing in one, and you like to switch over to something more for development later. Or if you have existing tables pointing to a sheet, you can then point to an AppSheet database table instead. So that is just small updates that are coming very soon here. And then finally, I wanted to also share a little bit about what's coming up and what the team is currently focusing on. So here, the first item is around policies. We're currently building a new policy to restrict users from sharing a database externally. So I know a lot of enterprise users and admins have been asking about this, and this is really to help govern your data and basically to be on par with the external app sharing policy that exists. So we'll be sharing when that is ready for use as well. In terms of automation, we're also still working on enabling manual changes inside the database and inside a sheet to trigger automation. So right now, all changes need to be done through an app in order to trigger automation. And we know that provides confusion and users are frustrated about that. So we definitely want to address that in the coming months. And then finally, as I mentioned before, performance is super important to us. So we want to improve both the interface performance of the database UI, the database interface, and then also the sync times between an app and a connected database as a data source. So those are a couple of just highlights that I wanted to bring up on what the team is currently working on. And I know there are some questions about, I think, rows and usage. Lauren, do you want to address them now or in the Q&A?
Yeah, let's take 2 questions now that are related to the rows, and then we'll hold the remaining questions for the Q&A time. So first question around that is, are there any changes coming with the column count limit? I have tables with 250 plus columns.
Yeah, there are currently no changes to the column count limit that we're working on. We're mostly working on scaling how big a table can be.
Okay, thank you. And then one more here is for core, how many rows?
Yeah, so for core, and because of some of the improvements that Christian just touched on, we're not changing the usage limits on the core plan because it is available for free for many more Workspace customers now. So the scalability changes that are reflected here are for AppSheet Enterprise customers.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we do see your other questions, so thank you for those. Keep them coming. We will save them for the Q&A portion. But before that, we're going to move into our final section on input functionality updates. So with this, Lucia, do you want to take it from here?
Actually, I think I'll take it from here at the beginning.
Thanks. All right, awesome. Thanks, Arthur.
Hi, everyone. So just for a second, before we go into all of the updates that we have about the input functionality, I want to talk a little bit about the functionality itself, because I know some of you mentioned they'd like to have a better understanding of what this feature does. So we'll have like different kind of like milestones in some sense for a little talk today. One, I want to first give you a sense of what that functionality does on a very, very simple example. Then we'll go through the 3 major different use cases that we support today. Then we'll finally talk about kind of like what's new and what's changed. And finally, Lucia will walk us through a demo of the 3 different use cases. So what's input? Before we dive there, let's kind of like imagine a certain situation where maybe you're at home, right? And you're in one room, maybe your home office, and you're like, doing your shopping, ordering right now. And in the other room, you have maybe your spouse that's, playing with your kid. And maybe one of the toys suddenly doesn't work anymore because it's running out of battery. So your spouse like calls you out across the house and is like, "Hey, Allison's kit's not working. We need to order new batteries, right? And you're thinking, well, yeah, I can do that, right? I know how to kind of like order new batteries, and you start doing that from where you're sitting, and at some point you're like hitting the place where you're like, wait, I'm missing some information here, right? And you're like, okay, what type of batteries do we need for that toy? I don't know which toy we're talking about at this point, and I don't know how many batteries I need for it. So you ask the question to your spouse, and they respond, well, we need 8 AAA batteries, for example, right? Now that you have this information that was provided to you kind of like at the last minute by someone who has the context of the request, you can finally proceed to completing that action. So really, like, the general pattern here that you should remember is somehow you know what to do, you know what the action is, but you're missing some key information. And so you're going to get that information from someone else that has the right context, right? So this is what the input feature is about. So if you've understood that, I think everyone can more or less relate to that little story. What does that mean for AppSheet? Well, on the screen here, you have, no, can you go back? Yeah, on the screen here on the left, you had the blue user that was kind of like your spouse. That's kind of like the app user. On the right side, the green kind of like icon is actually representing the app, or more specifically, an action or a task within the AppSheet app. So here I'm talking about like the action and the task as components that you can add to your app, right? So let's go to the next slide, please. Now we can try to generalize this pattern for apps. In general, it's a pattern that's helpful when you want to complete an action or a task, and that action or task is essentially missing some information. And so it's going to get that information from another context, right? So overall, what this is used for, the input feature, is really about passing information from one context to another. And here we have kind of like 3 use cases where I'm going to kind of like talk more specifically about them. The first one, prompt users for information, is the example that I just gave you, right? So we can think of it as another example. If you have an app that is managing customers and orders, right? On your app, you may have like a quick action button that lets you update the order status. Now, the action is generic, and it only has access to a certain context, which is the table of the orders. But it doesn't know what should be the new status. That needs to be provided by someone else, in this case, the user, right? So that's what it's going to do. When the user decides to trigger that action, update the order status, it's going to ask the user, well, please provide me the missing information that I need to complete the action, right? So at the last minute, the app is asking for the missing information because it doesn't have access to the context to that specific context. The second use case is when you want to pass information from one table to another. So in the previous one, the original context was the user passing the information, and then the other context was the action. In the second use case, we're looking at essentially kind of like one table has some information and it needs to pass that information to the other table. So again, if you think about an app that helps you manage customers and orders, you, for example, may want to deactivate a customer account, right? when you deactivate that customer account because maybe they requested it, all the orders that are still pending should be canceled, right? And so when you trigger that action on the customer, the order table knows that it needs to take some action, but it doesn't know what to do exactly because it's a pretty generic action. And so it needs to know from the customer table that this is about like an account deactivation, and therefore all the orders should be canceled. So the information here that's being passed from the customer table to the orders table is about deactivation. So if that's not clear, Lucia is going to show you kind of like in the demo how this happens in the app and how to set it up properly. Now let's talk about the third one. If you want to reuse automation tasks and the information is provided by the process, you can use, again, input feature. So imagine that in this case, you have a task that can be reused in different contexts, right? And each context is meant actually like a different process. So in some example, you may want to send an email, right? That's one of the tasks. Send an email in certain situations and or data related to that situation in the email. And really the task itself, the email, doesn't know what that information is. It has access to, the table that it's dealing with, but it doesn't know the general context of the process. And so the process can, compute something on the fly and then pass it on to the task. So again, in this case, the first context is the one of the process. The second context is the one of the task itself. And every single time, right? So there's that information that's passing from one context to another. And that information generally is provided at the last minute. Essentially, it's like whenever it needs to complete the action or the task, it's going to get that information from the other context. And in that case, it can be either the user, it can be another table, or it can be a process. So next slide, please. So I know a lot of you have already been using the input feature. It's been in preview or in beta, same. It's been in beta for a while now with a scope that was limited to the first 2 use cases. So the first thing that's happening is that this is becoming now generally available, meaning it's not considered a beta feature anymore, and we'll be officially supporting it. And yeah, you should definitely kind of like use it. The one thing that changes, and that's important to know, is that the syntax is changing, right? For those of you who are familiar with it and have been using it, you know that you could write an expression that says something like input, level input, and then some kind of like default value to declare and kind of like initialize the input variable. Now that it's changing, it's going to be a little bit different. We're instead going to have an explicit definition of the input variable. And what that means, and Lucia is going to show you anyway, it takes a little bit, an extra step, I would say, to use it. But it also means that the editor is going to be a lot more explicit about you using that syntax, the input feature. So you're going to be more easily able to figure out, oh, this task or this action is using the input feature. There were a lot of reasons why we kind of like switched the syntax, but overall, we felt like it was easier to adopt existing patterns in AppSheet. And especially when we're looking a little bit into the future, when we get to it, and if we get to expanding the functionality, we know that we'd rather work with the new syntax. Now, the second thing that changes is that there's now a new use case that is being supported, and it's for like automation tasks. So I think we can now move on to a demo. Lucia, all yours.
Thank you, Arthur. So now I'm going to do the demo. So I have a order management app, and it has a customer table and also an order table. So each customer could have more than one orders, and the order table maintains all the order details information, including the order status. The status could be pending, processing, or canceled. The customer table contains all the customer information, including its status, which can be active and deactive. So now I'm going to do the demo based on the 3 use cases explained before by Arthur. About the first use case, prompt user for information. So as an app creator, I want the app to be able to let the user provide input about why the order status is changed when it's being updated. For example, who processed the order and why the order is canceled. So that's why I have this action called update the order status with note. I can define 2 inputs here. One is called status, the other one is note. And then I can, instead of like assigning a constant value to status or note, I assign the input value to it. And then when I run it, so when I open the order, I will be able to when I click on the action, so user can provide the input, which status I want to change it to, and why I want to change this status, processed by Bob. So this is about the first use case. So about the second use case, passing info from one table to another, I have another action about, this is called deactivate the customer's account. So when I deactivate the customer's account, I not only want to change the customer status from active to deactivated, I also want to cancel all of its status, which means change all the order status from either pending or processing to canceled. So that's why I have this grouped action, and the grouped action includes the first action is change the customer status to deactivated. The second one is a ref action, which is cancel all the customers' orders. So let's see the ref action. In the ref action, it references another the action that update order status with node, and it passed the value to it through input. So this is how we can run it. So when I deactivate the customer's account, it will not only change the customer status to deactivated, it will also update all the status with note. So for the second use case. For the use case 3, the pass info to task or actions from process. As an app creator, I may want to check whether the customer's order can be processed or not before sending the order as an email to the managers for review. So in order to do that, I have a separate process that does the checking. And then I also set up the bot that when a new order is created, first it will call the process to check whether the order can be processed or not, and the process will return a value. And then I can pass the value that returned from the previous step to the email task as an input. So this is how the input is set up here in the advanced section, and this is how the input is referenced inside the email body. And then I have an email that already, I have this bot run before, and then this is the sample email showing whether the order can be processed or not. So that's for the use case 3. So that's for the demo. I will hand over back to Arthur.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe that the input feature can be quite complex, right? Because it works with automation, it works in the app itself, it works with data action, it works with tasks. So it can easily be kind of like overwhelming. If there's one thing that I want you to remember about that feature is kind of like the example that I mentioned really at the beginning. Okay, getting passing information from one context to another, and so it's when a user provides that information at the last kind of like minute, right? In the example that I gave. One thing to note is that there are other ways, creative ways for app creators to have the same effect without using the input feature, but it's a little bit more. It's definitely more involved in terms of what you need to build in the app to have the same effect. If we take the example again of like, your spouse being in the other room and you sitting in your home office, for example, you could get up and go to that other room, check the toy, and verify all that information, get it for yourself. But it's a little bit more work, right? Same way, you could create an action that opens a specific form that has only the information that you want, but all of this is just like extra work for the app creator. And so the input feature really makes it more natural and easier to pass certain information from one context to another. All right, next slide. So this is becoming generally available in the next couple of weeks. You're not seeing the new syntax yet or the support for the automation tasks today, but it's going to roll out very, very soon. And the documentation is going to be updated with the new syntax and all of that. Now, for those of you who are already using the input feature as it was defined during its beta release, we do plan on, for the time being, supporting both syntax, right? So in the same app, you could have some of the input functionality be implemented with the previous syntax and the new one. The only thing that you need to know is that you can't mix the two syntaxes in one action or in one task. Okay, it can be supported in different tasks in the same action, but not within a unique action or unique or task. So we're going to be supporting both of the syntax for a while, and we're going to proceed though to a migration of existing apps that leverage the old syntax and go to the new syntax. So it's going to happen kind of like in two phases. The first phase, we're going to automatically migrate the syntax when it's simple, right? So as an example, when you see here in the middle the little piece of expression input one default value, we can easily migrate for you. And so we'll set up something so that you can just accept and then it's done for you. There are other use cases where I think it's going to be a little bit more complicated, and so in that phase 2, we'll tackle those, but essentially we'll need the app creators of the app to be involved. So we're hoping that this will happen starting towards the end of October, and it's probably going to take a couple of months. We will eventually turn off the old syntax, right? But that will be officially announced, and probably the timeline that we're looking at right now is like early 2024. Yeah, maybe one more thing to add to close this. This is a really powerful feature. There's probably people who are going to want more of it. So for example, the input functionality is not supported for all data action. In particular, one that we know people want is like to add a new row to another table using values from this row. This type of data action today is still not supported. So we still have that in mind, don't worry. But I think we first needed to kind of like launch this to GA before we could expand some of the functionalities. All right, Lauren, I think back to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the demonstrations and information, and thank you, everyone, for your questions. We do have those ready to go, but before doing that, we have just a few resources for you. That first one is the link to the AppSheet community, which is also in the YouTube description. So if you're not familiar, this is where you can stay up to date on future events, get your questions answered in the forums, and engage with each other and with the Googlers who are making these products. So feel free to jump into the community, and we'd love to see and stay in touch with you there. That second link is for our feedback form for this event, and we'll drop that into the chat as well. But it'll just take 30 seconds to a minute, and we'd love to hear your feedback on this session and any ideas or suggestions you have for topics in our upcoming events. And then lastly is a few upcoming AppSheet and Workspace events. So we have one more on Thursday this week on Workspace security, and then another one to highlight around using AppScript on October 6th. As well, if you are in person at any of the locations listed here on this slide, you can join the Developer Summit in person. Okay, with that, we will now dive into your questions. So thanks for your patience. As we mentioned, we do have a few pre-submitted questions that we hope will also address some of the common questions that you may be thinking as well. So that first one out of the gate is, when will Duet AI be available to users with AppSheet? I saw that it was as simple as typing out your use case and an app would be generated. So I'll hand it over to the team for this first question.
Yeah, I'll take that. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so Duet AI, yeah, pretty amazing. You just kind of like say in your own words what kind of information you want to track, what kind of app it is, and it helps you build it. I think when we're still kind of like in early stages on this, but yeah, it looks very, very promising. So when will this be available to users? So right now, Duet AI in AppSheet is only offered through a Google Chat app, right? So that means you need to have access to a Google Chat. So that's kind of like one requirement. Second one is this will be available only to customers who have a paying subscription, and that means a starter, core, or enterprise licenses. Finally, so when does it actually get available? So some customers, we started a rollout, right? And some customers already have access to it. We do anticipate that the rollout initially is going to be somewhat slow, in that we're going to enable enterprise accounts first, and then roll out more heavily once we go past a certain threshold. So I don't know who's asking this, right, overall, but we anticipate that it's probably going to take a couple of months probably to ramp this up. Some of it is dependent on kind of what people tell us, but mostly on the bandwidth that we have with the AI model behind it.
Great. Thank you, Arthur. Stay tuned. Exciting updates coming soon. All right. Our next question is, how do you integrate AppSheet databases with other tools such as Looker or exchange data with other databases like BigQuery, and then perform ETL or ELT tooling?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I saw a similar one pop up in the chat as well. So currently, the main way to integrate with AppSheet Database is still through AppSheet. So through AppSheet on enterprise plans, I believe there is an REST API that you can use to talk to the data source of your app. You can also use the AppSheet and Looker Studio connector to be able to build charts and reporting dashboards off of your AppSheet database. So all the means of connections and integrations are still through AppSheet there.
Great. Thanks, Shirley. Is there a migration path for seamlessly moving Google Sheets to AppSheet databases rather than having to manually re-enter all data?
Yeah, so right now, what you can do if you have a Google Sheet is actually import that into an AppSheet database. So just on the My Apps page for appsheet.com, once you sign in, you'll be able to click on Create, and then under Create, you can choose Databases, and you can start with a blank one or import from Google Sheets. There are some limitations to the amount of data you can import from a sheet into an AppSheet database, specifically on the number of tables. So that's important to keep in mind. And I believe all the limitations are in our support center articles, since we're constantly trying to update them and try to allow users to import more data. But that's the main way that you can import your data. And then we'll try to infer the column types that would be appropriate for your data, so you don't have to change them. But if you do need to change the column types, you can do that inside the AppSheet database. And if there are compatible column type changes, we'll try to preserve your data and switch them accordingly. Of course, just a reminder, when you do change the column types, you'll have to regenerate your schema inside the app editor if you've connected it to the app editor already.
Great. Okay, just a couple more here. What is the process and cost for upgrading from the Workspace included AppSheet Core to Enterprise? Does Workspace Enterprise include AppSheet Enterprise? Oh, Christian, just on mute. Yep.
Sorry, I forgot I muted. So in general, you'll definitely want to contact your sales rep to get a little bit more precise answers. But in general, yeah, this is something that we don't have like a clear publishing guide other than what we stated for our AppSheet pricing. But I would say for some of these like various permutations, you can always contact your sales rep to get precise data on that.
Sounds good. Okay, I think this is the last one before we dive into the chat. So will you change how the modal screen for the input functionality looks like in desktop mode? It often looks too small on big monitors.
Yeah, we know that. So I'm not sure if the person here is referring to the desktop mode really as like the toggle that you can enable a different UI, or if they just simply mean for the just like when a user's on desktop and it could be with the kind of like the mobile framework to look at the data. But no matter what, yes, that makes sense. The desktop preview or the desktop mode right now is more like in preview, and so we haven't gotten to that part yet. But I agree that right now the mobile screen is a little bit too small. We'll get to it. So just be patient with us. That's all.
Great. Okay, folks, now it's time for Q&A. Thank you, Roderick, our community manager for AppSheet, has been answering some of your questions. So thank you for those. But let's dive in. So this one is around the Workspace update. So does the nonprofit inclusion mean that they won't have to pay for the per user license?
I don't think so. We could probably double check that, but I don't think they would have to pay for the per user license in that sense because it's already included. They were already paying for it anyway, so I believe that's the case.
Okay, we can do some additional looking into it as well, but sounds good. Okay, so I think this question has already been addressed, but for a core customer, what is the increase limit now?
Yeah, I believe this is for AppSheet databases. For core customers, there's currently no increase to the usage limits for AppSheet databases.
All right. And there were a couple of questions around this. So is there any difference in using Google Sheets versus the database option at all?
Yeah, there are a couple of differences here. Mainly the two categories are just the app creator experience as well as performance. I believe we shared a link to a support article that summarizes the performance considerations, and we can share that in the follow-up notes as well. But the main thing to consider is that with AppSheet databases, we're enabling a higher number of concurrent edits between the database and the app. So it's able to read and write data quicker and at a higher scale, especially if you have a lot of people editing your app at the same time. So that performance increase is better compared to Sheets. In terms of app creator performance, or sorry, usability, with AppSheet databases, we make creating references and managing your data simpler because you do have structured column types compared to a Google Sheet. So you can find it easier to keep your data in good form so that AppSheet is able to understand it and build useful tables and views off of that. So those are the two main highlights, I'd say, for Google Sheets versus the database option.
Great, thank you. And yes, we do have a support article that we posted into the chat. So just surfacing that again on the screen regarding AppSheet databases and Sheets performance concepts. Okay, our next question is, I'm just starting to get into using AppSheet. I'm wondering if email can send a doc rather than just a PDF. We currently use Form Publisher that sends an editable doc from Google Forms.
Yeah, I can maybe start this off and pass along to others. So in order to generate a new doc, you'd have to use AppScript. Right now, there isn't a way to kind of natively or do that in a pre-built way for AppSheet automation. So it does involve more complex use cases for using AppScript to create that new doc and be able to use it and send it out to people. I don't know if others wanted to add anything there.
Also, just in general, like if you just need to send a link to an existing doc, typically you just pass the URL, and then it's up to the end user to be able to access it. But yeah, but a custom generated doc, yeah, what Shirley is describing is correct. Yeah.
Sounds good. And we did respond in the chat as well, but maybe Shirley, you can just provide an overview around row limits with external databases or with Sheets.
Yeah, so when your data is stored externally to AppSheet, so if it's in a Google Sheets or any other data source like a SQL database, AppSheet does not limit the storage or number of rows you have in that data source. You'd have to refer to that actual source for their limits. So for example, with Google Sheets, you would have to refer to Google Sheet limits for how much data can be stored there, and AppSheet doesn't enforce a limit on the number of rows or cells that you can store in the sheet.
Sounds good. Thanks for that explanation. This is more of a license question. If I use an enterprise license to use some functionality for development, does every user need to be on an enterprise license as well?
So yeah, in general, yeah, it's basically enterprise license for both the creators and the users as well. The enforcement part of it may not always be there, and so that's something that we're continuing to work on as we roll that out a little bit better. But in general, yeah, that's the case.
Okay, thanks, Christian. This might be a broader question, but what is the difference between a Gmail user email versus a domain email user?
So I mean, I could vouch. volunteer an answer there. I mean, Gmail, I think you're just referring to like AppSheet, like just using a free version, the free version of AppSheet, where you can build stuff with your own data. Typically, with a domain, you're under like Workspace, for example. That's a very common example where you're under a specific domain. You can have, like, for example, the sharing of applications. You can have it focused specifically to users within that domain, as opposed to just individual named users and such. I think that's it, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I'd point out that, you mentioned at the beginning, like a Gmail user has access to the free kind of like version, but they can also buy Starter and Core, and I think even, I don't know about the enterprise licenses, but at least they can buy Starter and Core licenses, right? And use the features associated with that plan as well.
Okay, thank you both. We did get a couple of questions around during the input functionality, if there was a demo or a template app available for this.
We don't have one ready available right now, but I can see how to make it like generally available online.
Yeah, we'll probably be able to make it available to among the template apps and label it as like something like input demo or something like that. We'll follow up.
Awesome. Thank you both. And then this was also referring to the input functionality demo. So in your example where you had a bot do your customer check, could this be configured to do a call to a MySQL database?
If the table is if the table's data provider is SQL, and we can use expression to query the data in that table. So if that's what the customer is asking.
Okay. So another question that we have is, are there any updates on a planned addition or planned additional of a local variable functionality? There are so many use cases this would enable.
Yeah, right now we don't have that general concept. You can right now work with like input variables. There's also the return values from a process and the previous values from a previous step. But that, in general, the local variable concept is not currently available. So is it planned right now? I mean, we have it in mind, but there's no kind of like, I wouldn't be able to give you a timeline on when this would happen. So yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, can we have light or dark mode by user? I like light, but my user with astigmatism likes dark. So definitely a good question regarding accessibility.
So I'm assuming this is for the end user of the application. So it's the app that should have light and dark mode. That should be available already. So if you go in the editor for that specific app, and you go, I think from memory, go to settings, and then something like theme and brand, or theming and branding, that should be one of the options available there. So yeah, just check it out and kind of like let us know if there's an issue with that.
All right, thank you. There are a couple of questions around the Google Tables product. So I was wondering, is AppSheet Databases going to replace the Google Tables beta product?
Yeah, so Google Tables, just to recap for folks who aren't aware, is currently in maintenance mode. It's also only available in the US, and the team is no longer making any feature improvements or updates to Tables beta. The team that actually worked on Tables beta is actually working on AppSheet Databases. So we've been focusing on making improvements for AppSheet Databases, especially the scaling improvements that I spoke about. So we're actively trying to improve AppSheet databases, especially for the same types of users that Google Tables had, the non-technical business user, to make and ensure data modeling is more friendly and also a great experience inside AppSheet. Right now, we're not calling AppSheet databases as a complete replacement of Tables beta because there are some feature gaps that are intentional. So, for example, inside Google Tables, you're able to create a form right beside your data. Right now inside AppSheet, you can do that using an AppSheet app. So we're not looking to recreate that experience inside the database interface itself. And there are other kind of smaller feature gaps there. So it's not a direct replacement, but you can find that it still tackles the same use cases and a lot of similar flows that you did before using Tables Beta, you should be able to use and do inside AppSheet. And AppSheet also comes along with many other benefits like being available in more regions and having governance and security features that AppSheet offers.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there any update on a, oh, we already asked this one. So sorry. I think we had another one. Here we go. Another one from this user. Any update on API or other methods for connecting directly to AppSheet databases, specifically when it comes to methods that would make it easy to regularly import data from a SQL database?
Yeah, so right now this is not planned on the roadmap. We don't plan on enabling a direct AppSheet database API. The workaround right now would be to use the AppSheet REST API to directly call or read or edit data attached to your app.
Okay. Another licensing question is the use of an AppSheet database have an additional cost if it's in the enterprise license?
No, so there's no additional cost for AppSheet databases since it's a feature of AppSheet. So when you purchase AppSheet or when you use AppSheet, it's all part of the same family of products. So there's no additional cost there. Of course, there's an additional cost to upgrade to enterprise, but that's enterprise licenses in general, and we're not selling this feature on its own or anything like that.
Can we have the option to work on multiple windows in mobile version as available in the desktop version?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question here. It's true that on desktop, right, you can have, let's say, a table view on one side with all your, customers on the left, and then when you click on it on the right side, there shows up a detailed view of the specific customer you clicked on. I don't know if that's what the user is asking about to have on mobile version, but we're not planning on doing this. Like the reason why we made this available on desktop is like we had some real estate, so we could leverage it, and people may be wanting to sift through some data a little bit more quickly. On mobile, we're pretty restricted in terms of what we can do, and we want to make sure like the app is by default really clear to users, and so that they know what to do next. Feels like it would be difficult to put multiple windows on mobile version. If you're really intent on doing something like this, I would suggest to explore the dashboard view type, which lets you embed multiple views within a single view. But you can see what it looks like on mobile version. Maybe that'll satisfy what you need. But other than that, I mean, opening app in multiple tabs. Oh no, I don't think that's going to be possible. Like you only have one app, right? Unless you use it through a mobile web browser, it's not going to be possible.
Thanks for that context, Arthur. So one more question, and I think this covers a couple questions that we've seen, and this will be the last one for today. So if I use an enterprise license to use some functionality for development, does every user need to be on an enterprise license as well? And I believe that is similar to another question that we received. If a citizen developer creates an app using AppSheet Enterprise standard license for improved performance, will AppSheet Core users be able to make full use of the app?
Yeah.
So I'll leave that one.
I think we touched it before, but basically, if you're using features that are part of enterprise, then you'll have to make sure that the end users also have that same level of their licensing. So yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If we did not get to your question, again, please use that the community as a resource. You can search for your answer if it already exists, or post a new one, and members from the community and the AppSheet team will be happy to help you out and respond. So as a final reminder, here are those resources for you, and we'd love to see you at one of our upcoming events. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, team, for all of the information that you shared today and the demos. With that said, any final thoughts or closing recommendations before we wrap up today?
I think we're good.
All right, go on and create apps. That's how we'll leave it. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you next time. Have a good one.
Bye everyone.